Sorry. All right. Good Sunday morning, everybody. Good Sunday morning again. So, chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita. This is always a fun. It'll probably take us as long as chapter 10 has taken us, but this is a really fun one because this is where he has the mystical vision. This is where this is the chapter where Arjuna is, kind of finally prepared to see, to experience samadhi at its maybe at its highest presentation, and that is seeing Krishna's true form. And it gets really cool. It gets like really kind of it's a very fun, colorful, very vivid detail in the Gita itself about what it is that Arjuna sees. So, let me just begin. Chapter 11, the cosmic vision. Of course, I'm reading out of Eknath Aswaran's translation. It begins with Arjuna asking a few statements and a question, I believe. The first passage, out of compassion, you have taught me the supreme mystery of the self. Right? It's capital S, self, of course. Through your words, my delusion is gone. I suppose there should be a note about that. Right? Through your words, my delusion is gone. I'm certainly not anyone to doubt Arjuna's statement about the vanquishing of his delusion, but right, it should be noted, of course, that at least in Patanjali's yoga, right, the possibility of delusion, right, to arise again after we have removed it from the mind is always a possibility. Right? So we can't just say, okay, it's gone now, we're good, right? Because even in that statement itself, it's like, it's a lot of pride, not the good kind of pride, the pride that could eventually lead it once again to the delusion that has now been removed. Okay, the second passage. You have explained the origin and end of every creature, O lotus-eyed one, and told me of your own supreme, limitless existence. Right? So we've seen, like, over and over again, those of you familiar with the Gita, over and over again, the beginning of all things, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end is what Krishna so often represents of all things. The third passage, just as you have described your infinite glory, O Lord, now I long to see it. I want to see you as the supreme ruler of creation. O Lord, master of yoga, if you think me strong enough to behold it, show me your immortal self. Okay, so if you're, again, unfamiliar with the Gita, I think this is like a really fun part of this book because Arjuna really doesn't know what he's getting himself into. Right? He really has no clue what he's getting himself into, as we'll come to find out. Krishna then goes on, the fifth passage, behold, Arjuna, a million divine forms with an infinite variety of color and shape. Behold the gods of the natural world and many more wonders never revealed before. Behold the entire cosmos turning within my body and the other things you desire to see. But these things cannot be seen with your physical eyes. Therefore, I give you spiritual vision to perceive my majestic power. Okay, now this immediately reminds me of something I have pulled up. Chapter 1 of the Dadi Ching. It's always a good one to know. There's no doubt about that. Of course, all 81 poems, if you will, are worth knowing. But this is one translation. I forget who does this translation. Maybe you can find out. Cannot. In any case, though, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Right? It's a very common refrain, right? Like God, try to explain God. Try to explain your God to somebody. Right? Try to explain the Tao to somebody. Try to explain Samadhi to somebody. Try to explain what, the feeling of yoga is to someone else. And chances are words, they're too limited, right? You're not going to have the language to fully illustrate to that person what it is that you've experienced. Right? The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. Right? So the beginning, right? Just again, very similar to some of the language that we read in the Gita. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. And that's the line that I really want to focus on. The named, right? This is where we start to use words to describe, right, the manifest from the unmanifest. Right? Here we have the 10,000 things, the myriad things, as sometimes it's translated as. And it reminds us of the lines that Krishna just told us, right? All the things that you might see and experience. Right? So this lower reality, if you will, are something that the sense organs can, kind of perceive. Yeah, maybe we, our knowledge, our capacity for the amount of knowledge limits our ability to fully explain all of those things. But we can certainly specialize enough so that we can understand something or maybe a few things very deeply and have a relatively good experience and understanding of many other things. But there's no way to know all things. It's like the foolishness of the enlightened period, right? The Enlightenment period. So this is a point when we can know everything. Probably not, but good try. So the named is the mother of the 10,000 things. So once we go from the unmanifest to the manifest, so the unmanifest, right, Krishna, the Tao, to the manifest, to all of the material, right? In yoga and Sankhya philosophy, we might describe it as the gunas, right? The qualities of those material things. Then, because they have texture, because they have qualities, we can now name them. Right? We can give them, not just language, but we can give them shape in our own minds. So the named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Right, and just going on, ever desireless, one can see the mystery, right, which I think is great. And this is really important here in chapter 11 of the Gita. Again, this is the first passage of the Tao Te Ching, just so we remember, the first chapter, that is. But this is a really important thing to note when it comes to the Bhagavad Gita, especially in this chapter. Because as we'll come to find out, Arjuna isn't exactly ready. Right? It's not as if he's fully prepared to take on all that is about to be revealed to him. So ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees the manifestations. Right? So ever desiring, one sees the we remain kind of stuck in that lower reality. Right? And this is a really interesting part of the Gita because to the unmanifest, right? And at the same time, the mind hasn't been fully purified just yet. Right? Reminds me of that obstacle that comes up in Sutra 130. Right? Having not gained a firm footing. And it's not as if it's a bad thing that that Arjuna, he wants so badly to go to that next step. But once he gets there, he pulls back a little bit. I remember practicing with David, and he was leaving for India. And it was probably like 10 years ago or something like that, 8 years ago. And I was like, I was working my way through second, and I told him, I was like, I'd like to practice up to Grandavasana. And this would have been the addition of, I guess at the time, Yoga Nidrasana, Titibhasana, Pinchamayurasana, and Grandavasana. So it was like a pretty big jump to take on 4 more poses. And those of you familiar with Titibhasana, it's exhausting. And I remember as he's preparing, and I have this, again, desire to take on these 4 more poses, excruciating poses. I remember, like, when he's ready to leave, that I tell him that I'm just not ready. I had practiced these 4 poses for about a month in the run up to him leaving. And then I'm like, you know what? I think I want to go back. I don't think I'm actually ready for those poses just yet. So sometimes you gotta, be careful what you wish for, kind of thing. All right, so that couplet there is always good. Ever desire less, one can see the mystery, right? It's almost like when you're ready, you'll know it, right? And if you're experiencing a thing, it may feel uncomfortable. It may not flow the way you expect it to, but it's also something that you're not repulsed by. And on the other hand, ever desiring, one sees the manifestations. I was stuck. My own personal experience, myself, I was stuck in creating those shapes, to seeing those forms through, not really practicing yoga, right? Not having been prepared for those postures, but instead kind of desiring just performing the shapes. And then, again, within a month's time, pulling back. Okay, and just to wrap it up, these 2 spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. Beautiful. That first chapter of the Tao, so good. Okay, but back to the Gita. As I mentioned, a few words there that Krishna really reminds me of that first chapter of the Tao Te Ching. I'm going to repeat what he says. So this is 5 through 8, passages 5 through 8. Krishna says, "Behold, Arjuna, 1,000,000 divine forms," right? The 10,000 things, right? The 10,000 things. That's what comes up there. "With an infinite variety of color and shape. Behold the gods of the natural world and many more wonders ever revealed before. Behold the entire cosmos turning within my body and the other things you desire to see." So that point there, that you desire to see, it's like desiring those postures, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to work out, right? So as the Tao said, right, desiring things, you're kind of stuck in kind of describing those shapes, but ever desireless, right? You get insight into the unmanifest, right? Into Krishna's actual being, that which can't be described. And 8, "But these things cannot be seen with your physical eyes. Therefore, I give you spiritual vision to perceive my majestic power." So, and this is really important as well, going back to my experience with, trying to add those 4 postures all at once when I clearly was not ready. But these things cannot be seen with your physical eyes. Right? What I was doing was kind of obsessing over the forms, right? Desiring those shapes, those postures. And therefore, I give you spiritual vision to perceive my majestic power. Therefore, I had to wait, right, until my mind, right, my body, sure, my breath, definitely, but certainly my mind was prepared to take on those next few postures, right? Having not established a firm footing. I believe it's get Sanjaya back into the mix here. If you remember, very early on, or and those of you out there that might be watching, if you're unfamiliar, Sanjaya is a character in the Gita who is a narrator to Dhritarashtra, the blind king. So Sanjaya was given clairaudience and clairvoyance so that he could describe what was going on to Dhritarashtra on the battlefield. So Sanjaya here narrating to the blind king the 9th passage, having spoken these words, Krishna, the master of yoga, revealed to Arjuna his most exalted lordly form. The 10th passage, he appeared with an infinite number of faces, ornamented by heavenly jewels, displaying unending miracles and the countless weapons of his power. Clothed in celestial garments and covered with garlands, sweet-smelling and heavenly fragrances, he showed himself as the infinite Lord, the source of all wonders, whose face is everywhere. A very common part of this. If 1,000 suns were to rise in the heavens at the same time, the blaze of their light would resemble the splendor of that supreme spirit. Right? And, I think light, and especially light that is just so radiant that, you're, I don't want to use the word blinded by, but maybe that's a good word, right? Blinded by the light. Who was that? Like REO Speedwagon or something? Blinded by the light, right? It's almost too much to consume, right? It's too much to take on. It's like an overload, right? Like when you have, too many things plugged into one outlet and the breaker trips. The light is so bright, right, that our minds just can't quite handle it, as we will come to see. Of course, this is still Sanjaya just explaining what is happening. The 13th passage, there, within the body of the God of gods, Arjuna saw all the manifold forms of the universe united as one. Filled with amazement, his hair standing on end in ecstasy, he bowed before the Lord with joined palms and spoke these words. All right, so now 2 things that come up. One I've already mentioned about that light, right? And light is something maybe some of you might perceive in like states of meditation. It's not, it might not be an actual light. It actually might be an infinite darkness, but a feeling of radiance. So we're looking at like language that is sometimes used to describe the absorptive state, the meditative state, right? Light, radiance being one, even maybe with your eyes closed, there is that, of course, very, the sense of sight is only experiencing darkness, but the sensation, visual or otherwise, is quite radiant and light, right? Light, bright. And then another one, so these are like signposts along the way, right? So if you're meditating, if you're practicing and you experience lightness, radiance, this is a great sign, right? This is like a really good sign. This is where the mind is kind of calm and stable enough and kind of in the zone, if you will, where we've achieved a certain state that we're, hopefully without too much desire, trying to achieve. And the other one is filled with amazement, his hair standing on end in ecstasy, right? So maybe you've experienced this as well in states of meditation or during your practice. Things are just kind of flowing and moving. And there's not just a lightness in your body and your postures and in your movements, but a lightness of your being as well. But, kind of feeling almost electrified, right? Kind of feel as if, again, those hairs standing on end, right? And in ecstasy. Okay. Okay, so then, again, Sanjaya had just described what he was seeing. Arjuna now, 15th passage. O Lord, I see within your body all the gods and every kind of living creature. I see Brahma, the creator, seated on a lotus. I see the ancient sages and the celestial serpents. I see infinite mouths and arms, stomachs and eyes, and you are embodied in every form. I see you everywhere, without beginning, middle, or end. You are the Lord of all creation, and the cosmos is your body. 17, you wear a crown and carry a mace and discus. Your radiance is blinding and immeasurable. I see you, who are so difficult to behold, shining like a fiery sun, blazing in every direction. Okay, so before we jump, and I'm gonna actually begin next week with Arjuna's description, but I do want to get into the 17th passage where he says, "You wear a crown and carry a mace and a discus," right? And these symbols, if you will, are supposed to, they symbolize something, right? So the mace is that which destroys ignorance, right? That which destroys ignorance. So the mace, if you're familiar, heavy, it's studded, right? It's actually like kind of, it's slightly encumbering for a weapon, all right? It's difficult to wield, right? And it's kind of like a symbol of, okay, well, if this destroys our delusion, our ignorance, then obviously a lot of work has to go into it to wield this weapon, right? And whether it is going through your sun salutations, working on handstand, working on your balance poses, headstand, TikToks, doesn't matter, right? That is making, if you will, not just the body, but the mind fit to carry that mace to destroy our ignorance. And then the discus, right? The discus is usually a discus of light. Like sometimes we'll talk about time as well, but here a discus of light. Again, light, right? Like the guru, right? The one who just simply removes the darkness, right? Removes the ignorance. Now the discus represents the mace has destroyed our ignorance. It has removed the covering over our higher intelligence, and now the light of our true wisdom starts to shine, and this might be that discus. Okay, good place to end. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Right? Again, happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy, anything that you might have planned, and remember, please, right? It's not about the love, between just two people. That would be silly and foolish, especially as yogis. There's no doubt we can create deeper bonds with people, but it's about love for yourself, right? It's about love for all the stuff around you in nature. So important, right? Your connection to it, right? The ecstasy that one feels in that connection. All right, y'all. Well, have a great day, okay? Peace. All right, and